Biden's campaign may be salvaged or destroyed by this NATO conference. For Joe Biden, this is a week of reckoning. 12 days following a sluggish debate performance that might rank among the worst in contemporary American history, the president is facing great pressure from both domestic and international quarters to maintain his political position. The NATO summit this week in Washington, D.C. might be the president's last chance to win at least a brief reprieve. Mr. Biden has been railing against his detractors, asserting the will of Democratic primary voters and calling on his rivals to come forward and attempt to oust him in the last several days. He has made it clear time and time again that he is pushing forward with his campaign and that there is no more room for doubt or fretting. Starting with the NATO summit will be that pushing forward. 3 days of meetings and public engagements, including a solo press conference on Thursday afternoon, will be hosted by Mr. Biden for alliance leaders. Mr. Biden, who is knowledgeable in international issues, ought to feel at ease on this platform. However, it also increases the already high stakes for his presidency because a bad performance will have consequences both at home and abroad. A gaffe may ignite a Democratic political stampede that would crush his chances of simply qualifying for the general election in November, much less winning it. It might also exacerbate worries from partners in Europe, who are worried about the possibility of a Trump presidency growing stronger and the significant changes in foreign policy that would follow. According to Christine Bezina, Executive Director of German Marshall Fund EO Strategy North, Biden is entering this week diminished. We are unsure of how he will get out of it, concerned foreign leaders. It is known that a lot of European politicians are concerned about Trump's foreign policy approach. The previous administration has denigrated worldwide multilateral partnerships. But during the last 2 weeks, Ms. Bezina claimed, these leaders have been dealing with a novel experience, Biden anxiety. She claims that following his dismal debate performance, US allies are starting to question the president's ability. They are expecting some proof that his performance that evening was an anomaly rather than a sign of the new normal ahead of the NATO summit. Having your closest and most significant ally falter is concerning, Ms. Bezina remarked. Thus, I believe there is a great deal of hope that Biden will pass the exam, but it raises greater doubts about the US's dependability if he is unable to deliver. All eyes will be on the US president as he participates in summit meetings, receives foreign dignitaries at the White House, and holds one-on-one conversations with influential figures, such as the recently elected British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Word about Mr. Biden's performance, whether positive or negative, will undoubtedly get out, even behind closed doors during NATO meetings. A panic attack by the Democratic Party. This week, Mr. Biden has an even more difficult domestic assignment. One of the president's main achievements, he has said, is strengthening and growing NATO in the face of Russian aggression. This sets his leadership apart from that of Trump and any Democratic contenders who might oppose him on the ballot. The summit will be his opportunity to showcase it to the American people. In his interview with ABC's George Stephanopoulos on Friday, the Trump said, "Who's going to be able to keep NATO together like me?" He went on to say that a suitable place to assess his abilities would be the NATO summit. Listen in, he invited. Observe what they say. However, many of the politicians, commentators and party activists who have already called for his resignation may not be satisfied if he just meets low expectations during the NATO summit and the press conference on Thursday. Merely making some impressive appearances won't suffice to deter the questions, stated leftist commentator and Washington Monthly editor Bill Scher, who recently wrote a piece advocating for Mr. Biden to give way to Vice President Kamala Harris. They squandered a week when there was really just a short window of time to put an end to all the uncertainty. There's no obvious way out of this predicament. Longtime supporter of Mr. Biden, Mr. Scher, claims that once public opinion turned against him, the president is now making an effort to back down through letters, television appearances, and phone calls to Democratic lawmakers. It might take a few weeks for the polls to completely reflect that mood, but by then it will probably be too late to unseat him. Mr. Keir remarked, "I know how tough it must be when you're getting close to the end of your life and you're not functioning as well as you used to. That must be extremely painful to have to accept in public." However, the evidence that indicates Mr. Biden is losing ground and will be defeated in November is becoming more and more obvious. According to polls, around 75% of Americans, including most Democrats, believe the president should resign. 6 Democratic members of Congress have urged him to drop his candidacy, while numerous more have just expressed ambivalence. The president is still adamant that he will carry out his campaign, and he has the delegates to the National Convention working for him to secure the Democratic nomination. He has complete control over the choice, and if he can get through the next week without making any significant mistakes, he might actually weather the current storm. But this week's narrative is predetermined. It's not one where NATO is commemorating its 75th anniversary and looking ahead to the difficulties that lie ahead. Rather, it's a story that might determine whether Mr. Biden survives to fight another day in politics.